Professor Zyx'thak's 4 eyes gleamed with excitement as he addressed his xenobiology class aboard the research vessel Curious Mind. The Vortak educator's tentacles writhed with enthusiasm, a clear sign of his anticipation for the day's lesson. Students, today we venture to Kepler 442c, home to the most feared predator in our galactic sector, he announced, his voice resonating through the ship's translation matrix. The Shadowmaw, Cadet Zyx, a young Zephyrian with crystalline skin that shifted from blue to nervous purple, raised one of his 3 arms. Professor, are you certain it's safe? The survival statistics for encounters with Shadowmaws are not encouraging. Professor Zyx'thak's laugh rumbled like distant thunder. Fear not, Cadet. We'll observe from a safe distance using our enhanced shielding technology. The Shadowmaw is indeed the apex predator of this system, standing 12 feet tall with claws that can slice through starship hull plating. Its stealth capabilities are legendary. It can become completely invisible to most sensor arrays. Cadet Korvac, a reptilian saurian whose scales gleamed emerald green, leaned forward with interest. I've read the reports, Professor. They say a single Shadowmaw once decimated an entire hegemony outpost. 300 soldiers, reduced to nothing in under an hour. Precisely correct, Cadet Korvac, the professor confirmed, pulling up a holographic display. The image showed a massive, panther-like creature with obsidian fur that seemed to absorb light itself. Its eyes glowed like twin supernovas, and its claws extended nearly 2 feet from each paw. The Shadowmaw possesses perfect predatory instincts, enhanced strength that allows it to leap over 100-meter chasms, and an intelligence that borders on sapience. It has no natural predators and sits uncontested at the top of its food chain. Marcus Chen, the only human in the class, studied the hologram with quiet intensity. His presence aboard the ship was part of the new Terran Galactic exchange program, though most of his classmates found humans rather unremarkable. Standing barely 6 feet tall with no natural weapons, enhanced senses, or obvious physical advantages, humans seemed almost fragile compared to the other species in the Galactic Union. Fascinating, Marcus murmured, making notes on his tablet. What's its hunting strategy? Excellent question, Cadet Chen, Professor Zyx'thak replied. The Shadowmaw is an ambush predator of the highest order. It stalks its prey for days, learning their patterns, before striking with surgical precision. Its victims rarely even realize they're being hunted until it's far too late. The ship's navigation officer, a spider-like arachnoid named Tektar, announced their arrival. Professor, we're approaching Kepler 442c. Shall I engage the enhanced shielding? Indeed, and maintain a safe distance of 50 kilometers from the surface. We're here to observe, not become a meal. As the planet came into view, a world of dense purple forests and towering crystal formations, the students pressed against the observation windows. Somewhere down there lurked one of the galaxy's most perfect killing machines. Now then, Professor Zyx'thak continued, who can tell me why the Shadowmaw has earned its fearsome reputation throughout known space? Cadet Zyx's skin shifted to a confident orange. Because nothing can challenge it, Professor. It's never met its match. Marcus Chen continued to study his tablet, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. If only they knew what was really at the top of the food chain. The research vessel's sensors detected the Shadowmaw 3 hours into their observation mission. It emerged from what appeared to be solid rock, its natural camouflage so perfect that even their advanced detection equipment had missed it initially. There! Cadet Korvac pointed excitedly at the main display. Look at the size of that monster. The creature was indeed magnificent and terrifying. 12 feet of pure predatory perfection. It moved through the alien forest with fluid grace that defied its massive size. Each step was calculated, silent, deadly. Observe how it moves, Professor Zyx'thak instructed, his voice hushed with academic reverence. Perfect economy of motion, every muscle fiber optimized for the hunt. Notice how its head constantly scans for threats, though of course, nothing on this planet could possibly threaten it. The Shadowmaw paused beneath a cluster of crystalline trees, its massive head turning slowly as it surveyed its domain. Even through the ship's cameras, its presence radiated an aura of absolute dominance. "Professor," Cadet Zyx'thak whispered, his skin now a pale, frightened white. "I'm reading another life form approaching the Shadowmaw's position." "Impossible," the professor scoffed. "What creature would be foolish enough to approach a Shadowmaw? Show me." The secondary display flickered to life, showing thermal readings from the forest floor. A much smaller heat signature was indeed moving through the underbrush, heading directly toward the apex predator. "It must be some form of scavenger," Professor Zyx'thak mused, hoping to feed on the Shadowmaw's eventual kill. "The poor creature has no idea what it's walking into." Marcus Chen leaned forward, studying the secondary display with growing interest. The heat signature was bipedal, roughly 6 feet tall, and moving with purposeful deliberation rather than the frantic scurrying of prey. "Professor," Marcus said quietly, "I think you should scan that secondary life form more thoroughly." "Whatever for, Cadet Chen? It's clearly just some unfortunate herbivore about to become the Shadowmaw's next meal." But Marcus was already accessing the ship's more detailed sensors. As the data processed, his expression shifted from interest to something approaching concern. "Professor," he said, his voice carefully controlled, "that's not an herbivore. The bone density, muscle mass distribution, and movement patterns, I think that's a human." The bridge fell silent except for the gentle hum of the ship's systems. Professor Zyx'thak's tentacles stopped their constant motion, freezing in disbelief. "A human? Here? That's impossible. This planet is completely uncharted. No human colonies exist in this sector." "Impossible or not," Marcus replied, pointing at the display, "that's definitely one of my species down there, and he's walking straight toward your apex predator." Cadet Korvak's scales shifted to a sickly yellow. "We have to warn him. He has no idea what he's walking into." "There's no time," Professor Zyx'thak said, his voice tense. "The Shadowmaw has already detected the approach. Look, it's positioning itself for an ambush." On the main display, the massive predator had indeed gone motionless, its body pressed low against the forest floor, its glowing eyes fixed on the approaching figure with predatory focus. Every line of its body spoke of coiled death, ready to spring. "This is horrible," Cadet Zyx'thak moaned. "We're about to witness a slaughter." Marcus Chen said nothing, but his grip tightened on the console's edge. His fellow students had no idea what they were actually about to witness. The human emerged from the dense undergrowth into a small clearing, and the ship's cameras finally got a clear view of him. He appeared to be a young man, perhaps in his late 20s, wearing simple brown clothing and carrying what looked like a basic camping pack. No weapons were visible. "By the void," Professor Zyx'thak breathed. "He's completely defenseless. How did a human even survive on this planet long enough to encounter the Shadowmaw?" The man, completely unaware he was being observed from orbit, paused in the clearing and pulled out a small device. He seemed to be taking readings of some kind, occasionally making notes in a journal. "He's a researcher," Marcus observed. "Probably a xenobiologist or geologist." "A dead researcher," Cadet Korvak corrected grimly. "Look." The Shadowmaw had begun its final approach. Moving like liquid darkness, it flowed from shadow to shadow, using the crystal formations and alien trees as cover. Its massive form should have been impossible to conceal, yet it seemed to bend light itself around its body. "This is the Shadowmaw's killing pattern," Professor Zyx'thak explained in horrified fascination. "It will position itself within striking distance, then launch a single fatal attack. The prey never sees it coming." The human continued his work, apparently oblivious to the doom stalking him. He knelt down to examine some sort of mineral formation, his back turned to the approaching predator. "Can't we do something?" Cadet Zyx'thak pleaded, his skin cycling through panicked color variations. "At this range, there's nothing we can do," the professor replied. "Any intervention would take too long." The Shadowmaw reached the edge of the clearing, now less than 30 feet from the unsuspecting human. Its muscles coiled like loaded springs, its claws extended to their full, terrifying length. its eyes locked onto the vulnerable neck of its prey. "I can't watch," Cadet Zyx'thak whispered, covering his optical organs. Marcus Chen's expression remained carefully neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Not fear, but anticipation. The Shadowmaw launched itself through the air in a perfect killing strike, 12 feet of apex predator moving with the speed and precision of a natural disaster. Its claws were aimed at the human's spine, a blow that would sever the nervous system instantly. At the last possible second, the human moved. It wasn't a panicked scramble or a lucky stumble. The man pivoted with fluid precision, his body flowing out of the Shadowmaw's attack vector like he'd choreographed the entire encounter. The massive predator's claws whistled through empty air as the human rolled to the side and came up in a crouch. "What?" Professor Zyx'thak began. The human's head turned, and for the first time, they saw his face clearly. Dark eyes, calm and calculating. Not a trace of fear or surprise. This wasn't a man who had narrowly avoided death. This was a man who had expected the attack. The Shadowmaw landed gracefully and spun to face its intended prey, confusion evident in its glowing eyes. In all its evolutionary history, nothing had ever avoided its killing strike. The human stood slowly, brushing dirt from his clothes. Then he did something that sent shock waves through the research vessel. He smiled. "By all the gods of my ancestors," Professor Zyx'thak whispered, his tentacles trembling. He knew. The human knew it was there. On the surface, the standoff continued. The Shadowmaw, apex predator of an entire world, faced the human across the small clearing. But something had fundamentally changed. The predator's body language was no longer that of a confident killer. It was cautious, uncertain. "How?" Cadet Korvak demanded. "How did he detect a Shadowmaw? Our best sensors barely picked it up." Marcus Chen finally spoke, his voice carrying a weight that his classmates had never heard before. "Because humans are persistence hunters." "What does that mean?" Cadet Zyx'thak asked, his skin a confused swirl of colors. "It means we're the monsters that other monsters check under their beds for," Marcus replied quietly. On the surface, the human began to move. Not toward the Shadowmaw, not away from it, he began to circle. His movements were unhurried but purposeful, each step calculated to maintain optimal distance while slowly shifting position. The Shadowmaw's confusion was growing. This small, seemingly helpless creature should have been paralyzed with terror. Instead, it was hunting. The predator's instincts screamed warnings that made no evolutionary sense. "I don't understand," Professor Zyx'thak said. "The human appears to be stalking the Shadowmaw. But that's impossible. Humans have no natural weapons, no enhanced senses, no significant physical advantages." "No," Marcus agreed. "We don't. What we have is something else entirely." The human on the surface had completed a quarter circle around the Shadowmaw, and the alien predator was becoming increasingly agitated. It lashed out with a tentative swipe of its claws, but the human was already moving, staying just outside its range. "He's mapping its attack patterns," Marcus explained, "learning its reach, its speed, its preferred striking angles. Humans are pattern recognition machines. We don't just see what's happening. We see what's going to happen." The Shadowmaw attempted another attack, this time a full charge. The human sidestepped at the last moment, and as the creature thundered past, he reached out and touched its flank. Not an attack, just a touch. A message. "I could have hurt you there." The effect on the Shadowmaw was immediate and profound. The creature that had never known fear suddenly understood that it was being toyed with. It spun around, but the human was already moving, maintaining that perfect distance. "This is insane," Cadet Korvak breathed. "A human is intimidating a Shadowmaw through pure psychology." "Not intimidating," Marcus corrected. "Teaching. He's showing it something it's never encountered before. A predator that hunts predators." The Shadowmaw tried to vanish, activating its natural camouflage. But the human's head tracked its movement perfectly, those dark eyes never losing focus on something the ship's sensors could barely detect. "How is he still seeing it?" Professor Zyx'thak demanded. "Because humans don't just use their eyes," Marcus explained. "We process microsounds, air displacement, scent traces, electromagnetic fields. When a human truly focuses on something, we become a sensor array that most technology can't match. The invisible Shadowmaw's nerve broke. It reappeared, backing away from the human who continued his slow, methodical approach. The roles had completely reversed. The apex predator was now the prey, and it knew it. Impossible, Cadet Zyx'thak whispered. The Shadowmaw is retreating. It's actually retreating. Of course it is, Marcus said softly. It just met something higher up the food chain. The Shadowmaw, greatest predator in known space, fled into the crystal forest like a frightened cub. The human watched it go, then calmly returned to his geological survey as if nothing had happened. The research vessel's bridge remained silent for long moments, each alien struggling to process what they had witnessed. Cadet Chen, Professor Zyx'thak finally managed, his voice shaky. I believe I owe your species an apology, and perhaps a significant revision to our xenobiology textbooks. Marcus turned from the displays to face his classmates, noting how they all unconsciously leaned away from him. Professor, what do you know about human evolution? Well, the standard texts describe humans as persistence hunters from a death world, but we assumed that was merely academic classification. Earth isn't just a death world, Marcus explained patiently. It's a death world that produced a species specifically designed to hunt other apex predators. For millions of years, humans chased down creatures that were bigger, stronger, and faster than us. We outlasted them. We outsmarted them. We made them extinct. Cadet Zyx'thak's skin had gone completely transparent with shock. You mean, humans are? Pursuit predators, Marcus confirmed. We don't have claws or fangs or natural armor. What we have is the ability to track anything, anywhere, forever. A human can follow a trail that's weeks old. We can run for days without stopping. We can go without food or water longer than most species can survive. And most importantly, we never give up. Professor Zyx'thak's tentacles had gone completely still. The Shadowmaw sensed this? Predators recognize predators, Marcus said simply. That Shadowmaw took one look at a human and its instincts screamed, apex predator. Something that could track it despite its camouflage. Something that showed no fear. Something that moved like it was already planning 10 steps ahead. But the human down there, Cadet Korvac stammered. He wasn't even trying to hunt the Shadowmaw. Marcus smiled, and his classmates suddenly understood why the expression looked so much like a predator baring its teeth. Exactly. He wasn't hunting it, and the Shadowmaw knew that was somehow worse. When an apex predator chooses not to kill you, it means you're so far beneath it on the food chain that you're not even worth the effort. The implications of this revelation rippled through the young aliens' minds. Humans weren't the harmless, unremarkable species they appeared to be. They were something far more terrifying, predators so advanced, so refined in their hunting abilities, that they had transcended the need for obvious physical weapons. How many humans are there in the galaxy? Cadet Zyx'thak asked in a very small voice. About 12 billion last census, Marcus replied casually. Though we're expanding pretty rapidly. New colonies every year. Professor Zyx'thak was furiously updating his notes. This explains so much about human behavior patterns. The way your diplomatic teams never seem intimidated, regardless of who they're negotiating with. The calm confidence your military advisors display even when facing overwhelming odds. The fact that human exploration teams volunteer for missions that other species consider suicide runs. We're not fearless, Marcus clarified. We just have a very different perspective on danger. When you've spent your evolutionary history hunting creatures that could kill you with a casual swipe, most threats seem manageable. The human on the surface had finished his survey work and was packing up his equipment. He glanced up at the sky once, as if he could sense their observation, nodded politely at the hidden ship, and disappeared back into the forest. Did he just? Cadet Korvac began. Acknowledge us? Probably, Marcus confirmed. Humans are very good at knowing when they're being watched. As the research vessel prepared to depart Kepler 442c, the alien students sat in contemplative silence. Everything they thought they knew about the galactic hierarchy had just been turned upside down. Cadet Chen, Professor Zyx'thak said eventually, "Might I ask you a personal question?" "Of course, Professor. When you first saw the Shadowmaw on our displays, what was your honest reaction?" Marcus considered the question carefully. "I was impressed by its efficiency, and I was wondering if it was intelligent enough to be reasoned with, or if it was just operating on instinct." "You weren't afraid?" "Of what, Professor?" "It's just another predator on another world. Admittedly a very successful one, but—" Marcus shrugged. "Earth had worse." The casual way he said those words, "Earth had worse," sent chills through every alien on the bridge. If humans considered a Shadowmaw just another predator, what kind of monsters had their home world produced? As the curious mind jumped to hyperspace, leaving the crystal world and its humbled apex predator behind, Professor Zyx'thak made a mental note to completely revise the xenobiology curriculum. The section on humans would need to be moved from harmless bipeds to an entirely new classification he was already formulating in his mind: apex persistence predators, approach with extreme caution. But perhaps most disturbing of all was the realization that the 12 billion humans spreading across the galaxy weren't invaders or conquerors in any traditional sense. They were simply doing what humans had always done: exploring new territories, cataloging new species, and very quietly establishing themselves at the top of whatever food chain they encountered. The galaxy's other apex predators just hadn't realized it yet. In his private quarters that night, Professor Zyx'thak updated his personal journal with a single, chilling observation. "Today I learned that humans don't fear monsters. Monsters fear humans. The scariest part? The humans don't even seem to realize how terrifying they are." Meanwhile, Marcus Chen reviewed his own notes from the day's expedition. Tomorrow they would be visiting a world known for its pack-hunting voidstalkers, creatures that the galactic community considered nearly as dangerous as Shadowmaws. He wondered if his classmates were ready to learn about how humans had domesticated wolves. Probably not, he decided. Better to let them discover these things gradually. After all, he didn't want to give anyone nightmares.